Imagine boarding a normal passenger flight. The weather is perfect. The pilots are experienced. The aircraft passes every safety check. Then just minutes after takeoff, everyone on board slowly loses consciousness. The plane keeps flying for hours across an entire country. No one answers the radio. No one takes control. And military fighter pilots soon discover something horrifying inside the cockpit. A passenger jet with almost everyone unconscious. This is the terrifying true story of Helios Airways Flight 522, the flight that became known as the Ghost Plane. On August 14, 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522 took off from Cyprus carrying 121 people, families, children, tourists, crew members. Nobody knew that within a short time, every person on board would face a silent danger that couldn't be seen, smelled, or heard. What followed became one of the strangest aviation disasters in modern history, a mystery that unfolded while the aircraft was still flying. For nearly 3 hours, this Boeing 737 continued through the skies with almost nobody conscious enough to control it. And the most chilling part? The plane itself was working perfectly. So what turned Flight 522 into a ghost plane? Let's find out. The morning of the flight. August 14th began like any other summer day in Cyprus. Helios Airways Flight 522 was scheduled to fly from Larnaca to Prague with a stop in Athens. The aircraft was a Boeing 737-300, not new, but reliable. The crew had flown similar routes countless times. The captain had more than 16,000 flight hours. The first officer had thousands more. Nothing appeared unusual. Passengers boarded the aircraft. Some were excited about vacations. Others were traveling for work. Parents settled children into their seats. Flight attendants prepared for departure. Everything seemed routine. But hidden deep inside the aircraft was a small switch. A switch that would soon determine the fate of everyone on board. The night before the flight, maintenance crews had inspected the aircraft. One technician had adjusted the cabin pressurization system. After the inspection, the setting was left in the wrong position. Nobody noticed, and that tiny oversight would trigger a disaster unlike anything the passengers could imagine. At 9:07 a.m., Flight 522 lifted off. The journey had officially begun. The first warning signs. As the aircraft climbed higher, the cabin should have remained comfortable. Modern airplanes don't simply carry people through the sky, they create an artificial atmosphere. Without cabin pressurization, humans cannot survive at high altitude. At 35,000 feet, there simply isn't enough oxygen. But inside Flight 522, something was going terribly wrong. The cabin wasn't pressurizing properly. Slowly, almost invisibly, oxygen levels began dropping. Then came the first warning alarm. A loud warning sounded in the cockpit. The pilots heard it, but they misunderstood its meaning. The alarm sounded similar to another warning they were more familiar with. Believing it was a takeoff configuration issue, the crew began searching for the wrong problem. Meanwhile, the aircraft continued climbing, higher and higher. Each minute reduced the oxygen available to everyone on board. Passengers likely felt symptoms: headaches, confusion, dizziness, extreme fatigue. But many probably assumed it was normal travel discomfort. Few could have guessed what was really happening. Inside the cockpit, the pilots were becoming impaired. Their thinking slowed. Decision-making became difficult. The lack of oxygen was silently taking control, and the crew didn't realize it. The silent enemy. One of the most dangerous things about hypoxia is that victims often don't know they're affected. People can feel calm, even comfortable, while their ability to think disappears. That's exactly what investigators believe happened on board Flight 522. As oxygen levels continued falling, communication became increasingly strange. Air traffic controllers attempted to contact the aircraft. No response. Again, no response. Controllers tried different frequencies. Still nothing. The aircraft continued exactly as programmed, flying steadily, maintaining altitude, following its route. But nobody seemed to be in control. To air traffic controllers, it looked like the pilots had vanished. The aircraft entered Greek airspace. Military officials became concerned. A commercial airliner was no longer communicating. In a post-9/11 world, that was a serious threat. Greek authorities made a decision. Fighter jets would be sent to intercept the aircraft. What those pilots discovered would shock the world. The fighter pilots arrive. Two F-16 fighter jets approached the Boeing 737. As they moved closer, the pilots looked through the cockpit windows. The sight was chilling. The captain appeared motionless. The first officer was slumped over. Neither pilot seemed responsive. No one reacted to the fighter jets flying nearby. Inside the passenger cabin, oxygen masks were hanging from the ceiling. Many passengers appeared unconscious. The fighter pilots immediately realized something catastrophic had happened. The aircraft was essentially flying itself. A passenger jet carrying 121 people, cruising through the sky, without active control. This was no longer a routine emergency. It was a ghost plane. Yet suddenly, something unexpected happened. Someone appeared inside the cockpit. Someone was still alive. Someone was still moving. And for a brief moment, hope returned. The last hero on board. The person entering the cockpit wasn't one of the pilots. It was a flight attendant named Andreas Prodromou. Investigators believe he had access to portable oxygen equipment. That oxygen may have allowed him to remain conscious longer than everyone else. Somehow, he reached the cockpit. Some reports suggest he had pilot training. The fighter pilots watched as he attempted to take control. Imagine the scene. An ordinary flight attendant, surrounded by unconscious passengers, alone inside a doomed aircraft, trying to save 121 lives. The engines were beginning to run low on fuel. Time was running out. The aircraft had already been flying for hours. Soon, one engine failed, then the second. The Boeing 737 began descending. Andreas continued fighting, but the situation had become impossible. The aircraft no longer had the power needed to remain airborne. The final moments had arrived. The crash. At approximately 12:04 p.m., Flight 522 crashed into hills near Grammatico, Greece. The impact destroyed the aircraft. All 121 people on board lost their lives. Rescue teams rushed to the scene, but there were no survivors. For investigators, the question wasn't simply how the crash happened. It was how an entire passenger jet could fly for hours with almost everyone unconscious. The answer would reveal a chain of events so simple that it seemed almost impossible. A single pressurization setting, one overlooked switch, one misunderstanding, and one warning that wasn't correctly identified. Together, they created one of aviation history's most haunting disasters. Today, Helios Airways Flight 522 remains one of the most disturbing aviation accidents ever recorded. Not because of terrorism, not because of bad weather, not because of mechanical failure, but because a tiny detail went unnoticed. The disaster changed aviation procedures around the world. Training was improved. Warning systems were reviewed. Pilots received greater awareness of hypoxia risks. Yet the story continues to fascinate people nearly 2 decades later, because it forces us to ask a terrifying question. What happens when danger arrives so quietly that nobody realizes it's there? Flight 522 gave the world that answer. A plane filled with passengers, flying across the sky with almost no one awake. A true ghost plane, and one of the strangest mysteries aviation has ever seen. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more real mysteries, aviation disasters, and unexplained events. Because sometimes, the truth is stranger than fiction.